People are incredibly resistant to change. They have different priorities. So CS is a lot more about influence than people think, and it's a lot harder than people think.
Today's successful revenue leaders once started their careers just like you and I. They faced the challenges that their careers brought to them, they rose to the occasion, and became the leaders that we admire today. Join me as we explore the skills and stories that make a great leader with a pinch of vulnerability. Hello and welcome to Sales Therapy. I'm your host, Alper Yurder. Grab a chair. This is your exclusive invitation to the therapy room, as leaders are going to be sharing their career-defining moments, their secret tips and tricks in their arsenal towards success. And I promise we'll always end on a positive note. All right. So Rachel today in her therapy couch, and and I in my parents' house. This is going to be an interesting recording today. So today in the therapy chair we have Rachel Provan, a super successful customer success leader who, after a decade of successful leadership at names like Doodle and Fidelis, is now coaching the next generation of CS managers on their transition to leadership. We'll talk about her success, the joy, the pain, and the journey as per usual. Welcome to Sales Therapy, Rachel. How are you feeling today?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm happy. It's spring, lots of energy.
And you're in New York, right?
Yes, I'm in Brooklyn.
How is New York doing these days? Brooklyn doing these days? How's the weather?
Choppy. It always is
Yeah.
in April. It's still, we always expect it to be warmer than it is. It's still around 50 degrees, so you still need, a real coat. But the
Really?
trees are blooming, so you feel like it should be warmer.
Yeah, it feels like the whole world is turning into Japan at this time. Washington with the cherry blossoms. To be honest,
Oh,
I
always, yeah.
I escaped the terrible weather in London and I came to Istanbul the other day, and it's just, it feels like this could be my everyday, and why isn't it?
Yeah, that's how I feel when I go to California.
There you go. Yeah, yeah. I think about the same 3 hours to the east, 3 hours to the west thing. That might be the theme. By the way, I
Hmm.
I might have mispronounced your surname in a very French way, saying Provan. Is it Proven? What is it really?
It's Provan. I
Provan.
wish it
There
was
you go.
Provan. It's very American, but most people pronounce it that way. So yeah, I did it first too.
Okay, any good therapy starts with childhood, obviously, and this is kind of the trademark of the show. When I start asking people about their growing up experiences, because it shapes the person we are today, and people generally tend to like talk about their childhood for 10 seconds and then start talking career. And I find myself like, no, can we please stay at the childhood and the younger formation years? Because I'm very interested in your growing up experience, which shapes the person that you are today. So can you share a bit of that with me?
It's going to be interesting because I was basically like a tiny 40-year-old uh, as a little kid.
Nice.
People have told me that like the entire time. I think it was from being an only child. Very smart parents with very good vocabularies. Most people had no idea what I was talking about when I was walking around trying to talk to my little friends, being like, "Are you being facetious?" Um, so, an only child, you spend a lot of time alone. You tend to have a pretty good imagination. You learn how to entertain yourself a lot. Um, but it did, not having other people around who were like me did definitely lead to me being curious about people and
Mm,
about what makes them tick and why they do the things they do and why
mm.
aren't I doing what I meant to do and things like that. So I always found people when I was a kid to be very confusing. As an adult, I find them to make perfect sense. Uh,
Really?
it,
Okay,
it was
that's
just that I
interesting.
was
I'm an
used to
only
relating
child
to
too.
adults.
A lot of that makes sense. Unfortunately, my parents weren't really big fans of playing with me either, and I was living in a bit of an
No.
isolated place the first 10 years of my life. And so, yeah, I completely relate to that. The curiosity is interesting, though. Why do you think the curiosity stems from being an only child? Is it like trying to keep yourself busy, interested, entertained? Is that where it's coming from?
Well, the curiosity about people was because I was not similar to other children in the way that I thought and
Mm,
behaved. Again, very much like I am now, which is great for now. Back then, little strange. I
little
got
bit
along great
strange.
with adults and but it did lead to a lot of other kids being like, "You're weird."
Yeah.
So trying to figure out like, well, what makes people like each other and what are people really thinking? Because I can't tell. So I got, and my father was a therapist as well. So I got a
Really?
lot of that
Wow.
very early on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. What makes people tick and all that. I love that. So very high awareness, obviously. And at what point then in life you felt like, okay, I finally find a bit more balance? Like, for example, childhood was tough for me as well, and then high school was also kind of horrible for 2 years, and then 1 year it was great. But in university, in college, I really felt like, okay, now I'm feeling good about life. What was that moment for you then?
Yeah. I had a better experience in high school, which I know is not all that common. But I really kind of found my tribe there, and I still have
Oh,
a
nice.
couple people that I'm really close to from there. I'm someone who collects friends and keeps them for life. But so I had my one best friend that I grew up with in grammar school, and then a couple in high school. So I definitely felt more, oh, this wasn't that I was necessarily all that weird. It's just that the other people around me weren't similar to me, but
Yeah,
there
yeah,
are people like me.
yeah,
Um, but I loved high school. I went to a very, I went to a prep school. It was incredibly intense. I don't think I've ever been under that much pressure again.
yeah,
And yeah, but I loved the people. I loved the things I learned there. We had really good teachers. Um, for college, I went to NYU for acting, which is something that surprises a lot of people. But yeah, that was my original go-to. I'd been acting professionally since I was 16, mainly in independent films, things like that, a little bit of
yeah.
stage, and yeah, went to NYU for that and psychology. But when you double major at NYU, you're taking 13 classes a semester. So still not really good at being a kid, not really good at like taking the time to have fun.
Yeah.
I just was spending all my time just soaking up everything I could. Um, and also, going to NYU, it's not like you really have a campus. You're just like now living in the city.
Um, did you then? By the way, I'm sorry to break the news, but you're not the first to be actor turned revenue leader in my show.
Oh,
I
I
think
know.
Chris.
Oh, on your show. Wow.
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
was
Chris.
before me?
I think Christina Bradley. She also had now. Yeah,
Ah,
she also had. She was supposed to be an actress, or yeah, I think maybe in Broadway even, and then she ended up where she
hmm.
ended up. I have one question to follow up, and then I'm going to move to the next section, which is: did you, now looking back, did you notice some early connections to your current profession, like during your formative years?
Oh,
Now
yeah,
looking back, does it make sense
absolutely.
to you?
Oh, absolutely. With customer success, what's funny is a lot of people would ask me when they'd find out I used to be an actor, and they're like, "Oh, so you're really good at, lying or pretending to like the customers." I was like, "That's not it
Yeah.
at all. I'm the worst liar
Okay.
in the world. I go beat red. There's my tell. I'm busted." But no, it was that as an actor, I really liked being able to slip into other people's shoes and see things
Mm,
from their perspective. And doing that is incredibly helpful in customer success, seeing things from the
super.
customer's perspective. And then as I moved on to leadership and then moved on to coaching, um, learning how to pivot those perspectives, not just to the customer, but also to, internal cross-functional leaders. What does influence look like? What do you need to do to influence others in a positive way without it being manipulation?
Mhm.
Because CS really you spend half your time just selling that CS is a worthwhile pursuit internally.
Yeah.
So that having that idea of, okay, what are these other departments focused on? What do they care about? How can we align what we're talking about with what they care about?
Yeah.
Um, so pivoting those perspectives is really what allowed me to do that. And then the combination of that with psychology sort of naturally led to my analysis and experiments of what works in CS leadership and in coaching.
Wow. Okay, so a very heightened sense of awareness and empathy. I get it.
Mm.
Did you always start your career in CS, or did you somehow transition into it? How did your career progress?
It was wild. So I was a teacher first, like an assistant teacher for a couple of years for pre-K and special needs kids.
Okay.
So that was amazing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps
Wow.
me a lot with being a mom now. I was doing temp work. Like I was tired of waitressing as an actress. I was like, I want to go home and not be smelly, either from children or food. Like I don't want to be sticky. I don't want to be smelly. I want a nice, clean office job. So I started temping and I ended up at this company at the time called Vintage Filings, and they really liked me. I really liked the people there, and they would allow me to zoom off for a month or two, film a movie, come back, still
Oh
have a job.
wow. Oh wow.
I wasn't going
Wonderful.
anywhere. Yeah.
So you
So,
discovered
they hired me
flexible
and that was the
work
deal.
before
I
everybody
did.
else.
I did. Um, but they knew, my level of productivity and what I was able to churn out. They're like, yeah, yeah, we want you to come back. So,
Nice.
okay. And I got to keep my health insurance, which is wild.
Yeah.
Um, so by the time I was around 28, I think I was like, all right, this isn't going to happen because honestly, as a woman, if you're around 28, and it hasn't happened, probably not going to. And I didn't want to be a big star either. I just wanted to be one of those people who like made a good living, but you couldn't put your finger on who they were.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
because
So
I
you
wanted
want
a
the
normal
best of
life. I
both
just
worlds.
enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course I
Yeah.
do. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I wasn't concerned like, oh, I'm not famous, but I was like, this is really inconsistent money. And now that I am paying rent, I need something, you
Yeah.
know, I want to figure out what I'm going to do if it's not this.
Yeah.
And I did look at going back to school to, officially become a psychologist, but I looked at the costs of school and then what most psychologists made. And I'm not talking about psychiatrists. It's very different if you're a doctor
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Of
you can
course.
prescribe, but I'm not going to med school. I faint at the sight of blood. So that is off the table. Um, so I looked at, the salaries around there. I was like, that's what I'm making now. You know, like I can't do that and like pay off the loans from never mind the new school, my last school. So it just didn't seem all that practical as much as that was what I wanted to do.
Okay. So I'm guessing
So I
customer
just
success paid better at the time,
yes, yes.
or hopefully now as well.
Still does. It
Yeah.
still
Okay. Good.
does a lot better. But I kept just rising through the ranks at this company, and I had a job that it was customer success, but we didn't know to call it that then.
Yeah.
Um, I took it from a role that was kind of like a hybrid account management production role.
Mm-hmm.
I was promoted to leader by the time I was like 26, 27, to
Mm-hmm.
manager. And I turned it more customer success-y because there was the general consensus then of kind of garbage in, garbage out. If they give us something terrible, that's what they're going to get. Like, and I noticed there were places where customers were stumbling, just common things that they would leave out. And this was something for SEC filings, so
Mm-hmm.
government filings, really important stuff. If you don't get it in by the deadline, if you're missing a signature, things like that, um, it's going to be a big problem. You're going to lose a lot of money. So I started being proactive, looking at ways like what can I do to make sure that people get this in not only looking good but on time and that everything is filled out. Like
Mm-hmm.
not a lawyer, no way I'm going to know every bit about what's included in a 10K, though I know a lot. But I just knew there were common places like I knew people would submit their numbers too late for them to be tagged with XBRL. So I just, created a customer journey, a post-sale customer journey of like, here's what you need to have when, here's what we're going to double check for you. Like we're going to run test filing every day before the deadline because it always crashes.
Yeah.
Uh, just doing all these things, and then um, our churn rate just went through the floor, and we started getting a lot bigger accounts, and they spread that across the department as like, hey, we should do it this way.
Okay. It sounds
Because
like
these,
almost like a pivotal
yeah,
moment where you discovered the essence of customer success, which is hand holding, empathy, creating visibility, transparency, making sure you're hand holding and moving between steps, next steps, and helping people to do certain things better. I don't know. I find like that's very a very nurturing, loving, affectionate
Yes.
role, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very it's it's interesting in the last couple of years, because it's always attracted very, you know, nurturing people. I call it like the helper personality.
Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it's always attracted that, and as it's become more relentlessly revenue focused,
yeah.
I feel like we're losing some of that.
Hmm.
Um, we don't necessarily have to, but I think that there's a fundamental problem with CS right now where everyone's focusing so much on revenue that they forget the fact that the way you get that revenue
Yeah,
is by helping your customers achieve their goals.
yeah,
If you do that, they're going to stay, they're going to be more open to buying more, they're going to tell other people. But if you just assume they're going to buy more right off the bat because, hey, we're so great,
yeah.
that's
I,
not about
I
them anymore. That's about you.
I completely hear that. At the same time, I feel like it's a bit of a convergence of things. For me, like in my career, I saw a very distinct separation between sales and customer success, and I see places where it started converging. And I think at our time, where getting new clients in the door, through the door, like every second is not possible, I think
Yeah.
sales is understanding, okay, we need to keep people happy. The second
Hmm.
R in the ARR stands for recurring. So there's a bit of customer success convergence there versus customer success
Right.
becoming more commercially minded, like you know.
Yeah, I think that a lot of customer success teams are being tasked with the commercial and being
Mm,
expected to behave like account management.
mm,
And really, arose by any other name, having it be more account management than customer success, not
mm,
measuring anything other than, well, how many upsells did you get?
mm,
And kind of expecting retention to be high automatically. Um, and it's interesting, we've been pivoting, and believe me, I understand. I want to own renewal, um, but we've also been pivoted towards revenue at pretty much the worst economic time
yeah.
since
Doesn't it make
2008.
sense? Well, of
Yeah.
course.
Um, and CS is it's a long-term growth strategy.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are expecting, well, you're not making tons of sales, CS doesn't work. And it's like,
Mm,
you're looking at the wrong things, you're looking at this the wrong way. Um, but by expecting, a quick fix from CS, that's not how this works. We're
yeah.
broccoli, we're not a cookie.
Yeah. Well, okay. I hope broccoli dipped into some chocolate.
I
I
say
should
that,
get
yeah.
this
It's
time.
like we're not sexy. We're not like, hey, this is going to be so exciting, and you're going to get all these new customers, and it's going to be a huge influx of cash. It's
Yeah.
like, no, you got to eat your broccoli every day to stay healthy, so you don't die. You
Yeah.
know, like, yes, you can have cookies. Yes, there is some of that in here. Yes, we will be building this up over time, but
Mm,
you can't wait until you're in the hospital and then just be like, give me all the broccoli.
yeah.
It doesn't work like that. You can't binge on it and get the same effect.
Yeah, I don't know if we're a little ahead of the curve or whatever, or it's just our business that requires it. But before, since we're talking about coming to today and the current issues, let's switch to that. And for example, for us, before hiring a salesperson, we decided to hire a customer success manager. So our
Wow.
first real commercial hire, because we're two founders, we're quite commercially savvy.
Hmm.
We can do the selling, but we
Yeah.
need to make sure that people are happy. So our
Yeah.
first hire has been a customer success. Then finally this quarter we're hiring our first founding AE. But to me, that convergence of customer success and sales and the essence that the buyer doesn't care what you are, they just want a
Yeah.
frictionless end-to-end experience. That means that we needed to bring a CS person who is, who can be a bit both, but who is
Hmm.
first and foremost, a helper, an advisor, somebody who can share best practice, which is, I think, the essence
Hmm.
of CS. It's not just support and solving problems, but actually
No.
showing the road. How do you feel the increasing power of CS, or increasing um, rising impact of CS over the broader revenue team is? Like, maybe we're an outlier, but don't you feel like there is a bit more improvement?
I I'm a little cynical, if you can't
Do it.
tell. But, you know, I tend to see things kind of a couple years ahead of where they are a lot of the
Hmm.
time, because it's like, all right, I've been in this for 17, 18 years. I kind of see the cycles that we go through.
Hmm.
And from what I see is like with the economy going down, everyone in CS was like, we need to be revenue leaders. Everybody go to revenue because that's the only way we're going to have a seat at the table.
Hmm.
But do we? I haven't found that that's worked. And that's just something I'm just really coming to. And I know it's counter to what most people say, but and I it's not even that I think we shouldn't own revenue. It's just that I think that we've pivoted too hard in that
Hmm.
direction and we've lost what CS is. So yeah, maybe it is more involved in revenue, but I don't think it gets any more respect than it did.
Hmm.
Um, I think that
What
it's
makes you think
based,
that?
they're
Because
calling it,
you're
they're
you're
calling it
coaching
account management. Mm.
you're coaching a lot of
Oh,
people, so you have
mhm.
your ear on the ground. So like, what kind of complaints or necking
Mm.
or upset stories are you hearing on a daily
Sure.
basis?
Well, and this is especially true in startups, right?
Mm.
Um, because a lot of the times, and look, I run a company myself. And when I became the head of that company, I only have one other employee. But when I became the head of that company, I noticed my perspective shifted. I wasn't
Mm.
immediately like drawing post sale customer journeys. I was like, how do I get people in the door?
Yeah.
You know, I'd already had a proven concept, it worked, but you know, that's what you focus on. How do we keep this going?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And there's this, it's very hard to see, especially when you're a founder CEO, outside of your own perspective, that what you've built on its own will not necessarily get the customer the result that they're looking for.
Hmm.
And that's not because there's anything wrong with the product, but
Mm.
because you're dealing with humans. This is not a product where you just say, all right, here's what I want you to do, here's what you need to do to get that result. You feed in the prompt and it spits out the result and it's the same every time. You wish. It's just
Hmm.
not like that. People are incredibly resistant to change. They have different priorities.
Of
So
course.
CS is a lot more about influence than people think. And it's a lot harder than people think because you've got to get buy in and influence all these various customer journeys. You know, I know that you have like various buyer journeys, and it's very similar. You know, we can't just motivate the executive sponsor. We
Yeah.
have to motivate the end users as
Yeah.
well to use it
Yeah.
because if they don't see any point, they're not going to get the result, and the executive sponsor is going to say that wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
Um, but the expectation, naturally, of the person and the people who created um, you know, the product, that their natural assumption is that people are going to be happy with it and that there's
Mm.
everything that they need there, and you don't need people to make that happen. And I
Hmm.
feel that way too. You know, the thing is my baby, my course is my baby, but I know enough at this point to have, you know, my number two there as customer success, and to, you know, have that perspective and to be listening to my customers. You know, when my CS leaders say, hey, we'd like more of this, it's like, great, boom, let's do it. Because they're going to have input that I couldn't necessarily have thought of from my perspective. But so what I've found is that most companies bring on CS. They've heard all the great stuff it can do, right? CS is popular now. So they think that it's just plug and play. You know, get CS in here. Maybe they'll create a customer journey and boom, 120 NRR. 6 months. Shouldn't take more than 6 months, right? With a Google Sheet, we should be fine. It's just not realistic. You know, building,
Especially with a Google Sheet, you want to it, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. Or even not a Google Sheet, they'll be like, let's get a tool. It's like, you don't have data yet. Like your data's a
Yeah.
mess. You don't have
Yeah.
telemetry. Like
Yeah.
they keep expecting an easy button, and that's not what this is, unfortunately. I wish it
Yeah.
was. Make my life a lot easier. But
Mm.
it's like resetting the expectations all the time of, yes, I know this is where you want to go. We are absolutely getting there. Here's how we get there. We do this,
Yeah.
this, this, and this, and they all build on each other. Because otherwise, it's just like, well, why aren't you upselling? It's like, we got here 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, I think I
Um,
was sitting on the other side of the table and from the sales and new business side of things, and things came to me very naturally. Like, okay, selling is very difficult, building complex sales cases and consensus
mhm.
and a lot of stakeholders and etc. So initially we started building flow, and for 1 year it was like, how do we get to yes? how do we help salespeople
Hmm.
to get to yes faster. But
Yeah,
now, over the last quarter or so, what I realize is the tool has been hacked by customer success people. So I'm going to ask you a few things that come from our
sure.
users specifically
Yeah.
about it. So, so customer success leaders, managers, etc., they started hacking the tool to do better onboarding, better activation, to make sure that people are following the steps they are supposed to, so they can get to seeing the benefit from the
Yes.
product, etc. So
Hmm.
talk me through maybe the essence of the job in that sense. What do you feel like what are the keywords that a customer success person has to be good with? In that sales is new business,
Hmm.
improved win rates, closing. What is the equivalent for customer success? Like what keywords, what magic tricks they are being expected to do so they are successful at their job?
Outcomes.
Outcomes.
Outcomes. I would say because we're all focused on NRR and things like that, which of course that's what you're trying to affect.
Mm-hmm.
We all want that, CS included. Um, but that's not a driver, it's a result.
Mm-hmm.
So the drivers of that are adoption, which is driven by onboarding. And onboarding really is if that's the first place I tell anybody to look. Like start with onboarding. I know you want to start with renewals, but you're losing them here if you don't nab them right at the beginning. And actually, I came out with an episode today on my podcast called The Psychology of Onboarding
Oh,
that
cool. I love that.
shows exactly why most people are doing it wrong, and some things you can do to make it work better with the way the human brain actually learns. um, because if you just make it one size fits all, show everybody everything your product can actually do, they walk away dazed and remembering maybe a tenth of what you said. That is not someone who's ready to succeed with your product. And I'm not saying we need to train people over and over and do spaced repetition, but there are certain ways to follow up via email with just a little tidbit, having a 2-minute video here and there, having walkthroughs on the platform guided, um, having things delivered in different ways over time
Yeah.
um, will cement it more. But also just saying, people, and this is a marketing thing too. Many times people will emphasize features over benefits. Um, because if you're working within the company and everyone's so excited about these features and look at all these things we can do, the company, you have to know what they're trying to achieve and how this plays into that. So, keywords, I'm not great with SEO, but I would say outcomes are the future. Um, I like what Gainsight has done with them and calling them verified outcomes. Basically getting the customer to say, getting the customer to check a box or something. You send it to them 6 months or so in, saying, all right, when you came to us, you were looking to achieve this outcome. And it's just based on a couple different use cases that your product can deliver. So you said you wanted this. Have you achieved that at this point? That correlates more strongly with renewal, upsell, advocacy than anything else. A yes or a
Mm.
no there. And it tells you exactly what you need to do next. Because I don't care what else you do, if they haven't gotten a result and they don't see a result coming really fast, not even a result, the result they wanted, the result they bought it for. Um, I don't care how nice your
Yeah.
experience is or how nice your people are. They're not going to renew because it's not worthwhile, you know? So ROI, people talk a
Mm.
lot about ROI. I find that ROI doesn't resonate with people in the same way, like when talking to customers. Um, Whereas result, goal, outcome, those things do,
Yeah. I love
and
that. It's
also
simple.
re,
Yeah.
yeah, it's simple. But that's what's frustrating to me because that's what's always been what our job is. Get them what they came for.
Mm.
That is job one. I think of the customer journey kind of like as a hill, right? So you're climbing through onboarding and adoption, and that's all the hard work, all the way to
Yeah.
get to that peak
Mm.
of we got it, we got them what they came for. And that's getting them everything they want. And then once we get there, we get to ski down the other side and get all the other stuff we want. The renewal, the expansion, the advocacy, the quotes, this and that. They're so much more open to that once you've just proven yourself.
Yeah. I hear how this conversation started is generally how it starts with every other CS expert leader. If you're having churn problem, if you don't have retention, if you don't have adoption, look at your onboarding. Start with the
Yeah.
onboarding. Your chances are you've done something wrong there. And I hear sometimes horror stories. Like we have a lot of RevOps users who tell me, the reason I use Flawless is because people sold the wrong thing in the first place. So I want to have more visibility into what they're selling. Like I
Yeah.
hear people saying 15% of deals are missold. Do you
And
have?
that is the
Yeah.
worst part of being in customer success, because when you're like, well, I can't get you that outcome. And they're like, but I paid you this money. It's like, we are at
What
an
can I do?
impasse. It literally does not do that, you
Yeah.
know?
Let me build that product for you, or let me do
Yeah, it's
my
like,
CS magic to
no.
pretend that this is the product. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's tough. There are so many ways that other departments can affect the results CS is able to get. You
Mm,
know, if sales missells, like doesn't get an ideal customer, if product isn't fully building their releases, getting to, the good old getting to 80, 85% and releasing, it
yeah.
does not help customer
How
success.
how do you make sure we avoid those horror stories from both a process and behavior standpoint? Like, make sure you're doing this, that, so you can build that, and maybe with a CS manager focus, and also from a tooling standpoint. I know that a lot of people love their Google spreadsheets, etc., but the buyers hate it. And when they see something like a flow where everything is in one place, they love it because it's easy for them. Blah blah. But how do you figure out your process behavior, your tooling around it? Can you share any tips, tricks for people
Yeah,
who might be in that
yeah.
situation?
Um, you know, Something that I teach on about a quarterly basis um, is all about the customer success maturity model,
Mm-hmm.
because customer success is built in stages, right? And a lot of people don't know the order that you're supposed to build it. They just hear about different points and are like, okay, I'll try that. That sounds good. Um, and they miss a lot of really foundational things that make the whole uh, make the whole operation kind of pointless. Like if you don't first base it on what is your customer trying to achieve, and what do they have to do to get there? What action steps do they have to take? What action steps do we have to take? And do we have more than one outcome or more than one type of customer? You
Mm-hmm.
know, you don't have to create a big dissertation on it, but just
Yeah.
know what your customers want, what your product does, and how those two things play into to one another, and how
Mm-hmm.
you get them there. Um, that is really year one, is understanding that, creating those customer journeys, plural, um, and cleaning up your data.
Mm.
Uh, I don't recommend getting a tool before you have figured those things out,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that is what a tool will help automate. Once you have those things figured out, you basically understand what playbooks you need,
Mm-hmm.
and you can use a tool to automate playbooks, but you basically understand what playbooks you need. You understand what you need to be looking for in terms of data to determine if they're getting the results. So that's why I really say to focus on those things first, but you have to set those expectations of, here's how it works. Here's how we get to that positive
Mm-hmm.
NRR.
Mm-hmm.
The very first step is building this foundation, and that does take a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to talk to customers. You can't do it without talking to customers.
Yeah.
People are like, all right, well,
Which
how
which
do I
is
follow
what
this? Yeah.
I was going to come to that point. Like buyers are now looking for all the help in the world, but they don't have any time
Hmm.
for you. Or,
Yeah.
we did some research into it, like what do buyers want today? And they want autonomy, availability, and authority. So basically, they want everything, but
Hmm.
they will not give you their time. They will not be on a
Right.
call with you unless, they really have to. How do you navigate that situation? Like, how can you make that
Part of that
happen?
is adapting. Yeah. And that is a huge thing in customer success as well. The QBR used to be king, and now people have, on average, 100, or it's more than this now, but about 130 SaaS products per company.
Wow.
And we all want to meet every 3 months. Like,
Yeah.
that's not
No,
at
thank
all
you.
possible, nor is it that person's job to just be
Yeah.
sitting and meeting with us and hearing about stats about our company. They don't care.
Yeah.
So we have to adapt to that, and we have to adapt to the new ways that people are preferring their communication. We can't just say, well, we need it this way. You have to find a new way to make it engaging for them. So, understanding that people prefer shorter content, that sometimes they prefer, very, very short video, like 30 seconds to a minute. Send them a Loom, send them something like that, along with a report. Just be like, here, quick visual of what's going on. Here's where you were, here's where you are, here's how that aligns with what you're trying to achieve. So you can see the progress that you've made. You can
I mean,
see,
I I
here's how that
agree.
aligns.
I
Yeah.
agree with all of the above, but then again, to be the devil's advocate, then the objection is, okay, you sent me a link, you sent me a video, it's here and there. I have a ton of emails from you. There's also intercom. You Slack me something like, do you hear any of that frustration that there's a lot of info being shared on a lot of channels and it becomes a bit like noise
Yes.
for the buyer?
Yes. I missed some of that, but I heard you say Slack, and I'm like, do not Slack with your customers. That is a
Okay.
boundary. Never. Because also, customer success is not support, right? We are working to become proactive. Everyone's going to start out reactive, but we're working to become proactive so that we can be influencing the results they get. Saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, you're going down the wrong path there. Let's keep it up this way." Or, "Oh, you're forgetting to log in and do what you need to do in here if you want to achieve that result." Kind of like a personal trainer that like
Yeah.
kicks your butt out of bed and you have to show up. Um, if you want us to be able to do that, we cannot be slacking, because maybe support, yes. But Slack is naturally a medium where people expect a faster response, whereas email, people wait a day, but so many customer success leaders I know are like, oh, but this customer's upset. I have to talk to them right away. It's like, they'll wait an hour, finish what you were doing, work on strategy. This isn't brain surgery. No one is dying on a table if you don't get to that message immediately. You know, so I think you do have to be very careful with those boundaries in
Yeah.
CS.
Okay. That's a very interesting and fresh perspective, and I think there's definitely the sales view of these things, like the driver person, always available, just make sure that you close things before deadline. Versus here you are saying like people will wait, like they're okay, they'll consume the information at their own time, they'll wait for one day, they're not dying. So I
Right,
think
one
that,
day, like,
yeah, yeah.
and that's a CS leader, not a CSM. I do think
Hmm.
there should be within a 24-hour period a response, but I've
Okay.
never heard of a customer being like, it's been 20 minutes and I haven't heard from my CSM. It's like, if you have a ticket, if something is broken, please
Yeah,
call support. But
yeah.
like a strategy issue, that's something that took time to happen and will take time to fix. Um,
I love that.
it, I just haven't seen it be as urgent and on fire as we tend to treat it.
Yeah,
Just because
yeah,
someone
yeah.
says it's urgent doesn't actually mean it is.
I think the problem also lies in the definition. When you see customer success as a support and ticket kind of thing, I think that's when you fall into that trap versus that's not it. It's somebody else's job. But in a startup, it's, all of our job, to be honest.
Right. And that is different, but at the same time, there needs to be a separate process, a separate flow for break fix
Hmm.
than there is for customer success.
Yeah,
And I do say to split out CS and support in that first year. That is essential. Otherwise, you have support, you don't have CS.
I agree with that. As we're coming towards the end of our episode, like Rachel, a few things I want to ask you, like how, especially a lot of our audience is quite, first time CS manager or maybe CS manager making the transition to leadership. Like, how can they develop themselves? How can they learn faster? Do you have like tips for self improvement in this space?
Yeah. I definitely think podcasts have been an incredible resource for us, because I don't know about anyone else, but I'm always on the go. I don't have time to sit down and read a book right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm either working or parenting or asleep. So I don't get to do that. I don't get to consume content the way I'd like, but I can do that on the go. I can do that washing dishes. I can do that, living my life. So I think that is very helpful. I would also say, um, you need to learn strategy, but you also need to learn psychology,
Yeah,
because everyone around here talks about best practices and it should be like this, and we should be it should be a customer centric organization, and this is what other departments should do. And it's like, okay, talk to me when you're in the real world. Show me, the company where that's happening, and
yeah,
great. But that's not necessarily going to be the case for you at a messy startup. And I see so many new leaders banging their head against that and saying to executive leadership, like, this isn't how it should be. Like, you're not enabling customer success. And it's like, shh, no, 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 no. Like, yes, you'll get there, but you don't have the resources for that yet. You gotta understand what it looks like at a startup versus, um, a large enterprise, and understand that it's okay if it's not perfect,
Oh
and you're not going to
God,
get there in an instant.
just at the last minute we're starting my therapy session, which is me coming from all that. Like I did it all the way the different way, enterprise, big complex sales, then series A, and now being a founder.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something
Yeah.
I'm learning. I'm probably
Oh, it's
making a lot
brutal.
of,
Yeah.
it is brutal. I'm making a lot of mistakes because I need everything to be perfect and etc.
Perfect.
And
Yep.
oh God, yeah. I think I should rewind and listen to that. You saying that, every week.
You need to listen to my podcast because this is what I talk about on
I
there.
absolutely
Um,
do.
yeah. But I talk about a lot of the mindset and the behavior habits, and where we shoot ourselves in the foot a lot just because of the
Yeah,
way our brains are set up,
yeah,
to keep us alive.
yeah. Just
And yeah, I mean, we're all people pleasing perfectionists over here, and that doesn't turn out so well for us.
no. For nobody, for nobody.
No,
Not for us,
for
not
nobody.
for
That's what I'm
our
saying.
people. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. It doesn't
But
truly serve anyone.
absolutely. Well, like any good therapist, I'm gonna have to cut us on the clock. But is there
Of
anything I
course,
should have
yes.
asked? I should have asked you, and I haven't, Rachel. Tell me.
Um, just to let people know, they can find me at provansuccess.com for customer success leadership coaching. And mainly I do that through the Customer Success Leadership Academy, which is for new or struggling customer success leaders.
Fantastic. And we'll be sharing all of that information obviously in the blog and as well as on
Amazing.
the podcast. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on my show today, for being on the therapy chair and
Oh,
sharing,
yeah.
the beautiful psychology of things with our people. We always love that on the show. This is going to be a wrap on this episode of Sales Therapy. Any closing remarks other than, where people can find you, which you already mentioned?
Beyond that, I would just say aim for, be like product, aim for 80% perfect. 80%
Okay.
perfect is perfect. Uh, it's something that you have to test and see, I am going to put this out and it's going to be scary and I feel like it's not good enough. Um, but then you see that the sky doesn't fall. And I always tell my CS leaders, like, you are sitting here, people are drowning out there, and you're sitting here with a life preserver that you won't give them because the embroidery isn't perfect.
Mm,
Throw the damn life preserver. They're not gonna mind, you know?
I love that.
You are the
I
one who
love
cares about that perfection. No one else is looking. They're just trying to grab hold of something.
Again, let's record this and put it on repeat and to myself. Okay. Well, this is going to be a wrap on this episode of Sales Therapy with Rachel. If you enjoy the show, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Thank you very much, Rachel, for being with us, and looking forward to seeing you again on the show.
Thank you so much. This was fun.